In the still of the night, they come silently, leaving no trace but fear, strange lights, and eerie encounters.
They took samples of my hair, of a ring that they cut around there that hasn't left. They cut marks that never left.
Are they just stories, or is there something more?
These things, I met them, and what they were was like basically silver morphing mercurial blobs.
For numerous decades, alien abductions have been nothing but a way to seek attention. But now, we know they hold more truth than bearable.
And it was enormous. I did a drawing of it.
Wow, it's
that,
huge.
Compared to you, looks massive.
Alan Godfrey.
40 years ago, in a quiet West Yorkshire village, one of the most convincing and disturbing alien encounters ever recorded took place.
On November 28, 1980, Alan Godfrey, a British investigator, was deep into a mysterious case. A man had lost his life in mysterious circumstances with no evidence of foul play, save for an unusual mark on his head. The case went cold.
There was no footprints belonging to him, disturbance on the coal.
Just 6 months later, Godfrey himself encountered a baffling event. While checking on some roaming cattle, he saw a white, dome-shaped object suddenly appear before him.
I've been sent to investigate this herd of cows. So I was driving up the road here when I could see in front of me up here this object. It looked to be completely blocking the road.
He was then overwhelmed by a bright flash of light. When he regained consciousness, he was 20 minutes and 100 yards away from where he had been, with no memory of what had occurred. Even weirder, he sported the same mark as the man. A coincidence or a shared fate?
Walking down the moor from the main road, something told me to turn around. I turned, and in the sky was a very cold steel blue light.
Dr. Carla Turner.
And good morning, everyone. I want to thank Ellen and Monty and the rest of the Austin MUFON organization.
Dr. Carla Turner didn't think her life would revolve around extraterrestrials. She was a respected college professor whose only passion was spreading love and education until her young daughter claimed she'd been abducted as a child. Intrigued and worried, Turner probed more and ended up discovering a big secret.
Angie was telling me about a recent abduction experience she just had, in which this particular group of humanoid-looking so-called hybrid aliens were with her in a facility, and they told her they came from the area of Cassiopeia.
Apparently, her family had a history of generational alien abductions. For some reason, extraterrestrials preferred the Turners, all of whom had different experiences with the aliens. Dr. Carla Turner herself had been taken, but she was lucky enough to escape unscathed. Her relatives, not so lucky. Many of them experienced the telltale signs of abduction: lost time perception, unwanted probes, and even breeding experiments. While criticized, Turner never changed her story.
Since you have been reporting this, you said that the military and people have been harassing you. Is that true?
It began the first time we even contacted anyone in UFO research to help us find out what was happening with our family. We were followed by unmarked white cars through 3 towns, because it was three or four towns away from where we lived.
Ted Rice.
I could personally witness what's going on in the lower levels of Dulce so that I could tell people. And for years I've held back because it was just absolutely too awful to tell anyone.
At 14, Ted Rice encountered mysterious beings he mistook for angels. They wore flowing robes of blue and green, their heads shrouded in hoods. They were allegedly insectoids, a race of aliens that resemble praying mantises. Rice doesn't remember much, except they took him someplace unknown. Here, he witnessed them preying on humans, but was miraculously unharmed and returned.
I looked, and what I saw were human torsos hanging on big meat hooks, and they hooked bone to hooks in the back of the body.
Years later, he met Maya, a woman claiming to live inside mountains. She disappeared, promising to return. After no contact, Ted became sure he'd actually met another insectoid, one that was masquerading as the gorgeous Maya to force him into a breeding experiment between extraterrestrials and humans. He knows his interactions weren't coincidences, and fears the day he meets them again.
We went to a large room that was extremely cold. And inside this room were boxes that were like little small metal caskets, human body part, packing them into these crates.
Grant Morrison. We are all familiar with Grant Morrison, the comic book writer who also wrote Batman and Robin series. But in 2000, during a disinfocon, Morrison revealed that he met aliens while on a trip to Kathmandu in 1994.
These things, I met them, and what they were was like silver, basically silver morphing mercurial blobs of chrome that think.
The aliens were tall and silver, as if painted in mercury. They then transported him in an aircraft to the 5th dimension, suspended in nothingness.
Took me to the 5th dimension. And the 5th dimension is outside space and time, and they explained to me what time is all about.
Morrison was told by the creatures that the world was just an incubator for larvae, and that humans actually existed beyond space and time.
The universe we live in is designed to grow larvae, right? Believe it, don't you? I don't have to believe it, I'm just setting the story here.
And the life we live is just our actual selves experiencing sections through time. Morrison went on in more detail, but it's clear whatever beings he met left a huge impression on him.
These things that we're experiencing right now are sections through time. Everyone in here is a section through time, but in actual fact, you're not experiencing your real body.
Peter Faust.
I had memories when I was an adult, 3 or 4 years ago, and then in regression is when I went back in time, saw myself as a child having the abductions.
In 1988, Peter Faust, at 33, claimed he was repeatedly abducted by strange beings throughout his childhood.
So when it first happened to you, is it something that you absolutely were sure of, or did it feel like a dream, or did you, what?
I had a conscious memory. I knew something happened in the middle of the night that I couldn't explain, that nowhere in my imagination could I have made this up.
These beings, about 4 feet tall, had large, pear-shaped heads and almond-shaped eyes. Strangely, Faust felt that he knew them, a sense of familiarity that added to his confusion.
You say in Dr. Mack's book that you always did believe somehow in guardian angels, that as a child you thought they were just guardian angels, and that you always believed that you had some way of talking to God.
He remembers pleading with them to stop, feeling both fear and recognition. He initially dismissed it as a bizarre dream, but couldn't shake the intense emotions it stirred.
In the middle of the night, I woke up, very conscious, walked over to my living room, saw something in the room, felt the white light, felt the paralysis, and then I fell asleep. Several hours later, I woke up and had these intense emotions associated with the experience that just, I couldn't fathom. Like, why was I so scared? Why was I terrified?
Seeking answers, he visited Dr. John E. Mack to discuss his experiences. Faust described being lifted through a window into a ship, shown strange movies, and subjected to unsettling experiments. Surprisingly, Dr. Mack concluded that Faust's experiences were genuine and proved that extraterrestrial creatures really do exist.
When I first heard about this, I thought this must be madness. I can't tell you how difficult it is to get people to go on television to talk about this. People are not interested in being before the public. They're very ashamed because they get ridiculed, humiliated about it.
Whitley Stiber.
Well, you're certainly not alone there. I also ended up in the same situation and went to Bud.
In December 1985, while Whitley Stiber was enjoying the Christmas holidays in his cabin in upstate New York, he was abruptly awakened by a strange entity. The being forcibly took him aboard a spacecraft, where he underwent typical alien medical procedures. Stiber was returned to his cabin, but unlike many abductees, he retained clear memories of the ordeal.
I was taken aboard a dark blue, what looked to me like a raft that was floating above our neighbor at night.
He detailed his experience in his 1987 book, Communion. Stiber also revealed that the aliens had implanted a chip in his brain, potentially for control or communication purposes.
I've had this implant put in my head and in my ear in 1989, an attempt to remove it in 1994, which is available on videotape.
Over the years, he wrote additional books, The Greys and Confirmation, describing encounters with gray aliens and even human-alien hybrids. Although scrutinized, his stories have never really been debunked, and are legendary for ufologists.
What they're apparently doing is bringing up material from my unconscious mind that I don't know that I remember. It uses as a kind of an inspirational process.
Mira Hansen.
Her and her 6-year-old son were driving home, and they observed some flying saucers in the sky. The next thing she remembers after that was her and her son were in their car, and it had no gas. It wasn't running.
On May 5th, 1980, Mira Hansen and her 6-year-old son were driving near Cimarron, New Mexico, when 5 mysterious objects landed nearby. Their journey suddenly had a 4-hour gap in their memory. Under hypnosis, Myrna recalled 2 humanoid figures in white suits herding a cow. When she protested, she and her son were taken aboard separate ships. She endured a horrifying examination, after which a tall, yellow-skinned being arrived, apologized, and punished the others. He then showed Myrna parts of the ship and took her to locations near Las Cruces and Roswell. Myrna was later taken to an underground base before being returned to the original abduction site. The events were confirmed by a doctor who tended to her wounds.
They were subject to flashes of bright lights. Apparently, the bright lights wiped their memory of the abduction.
Wow. Okay. Seems like hypnosis helped.
Yes.
Mabel White.
Ask them why were they gathering eggs and this, and they told me they were making a hybrid race.
Mabel White's childhood in the 1930s was marked by strange, haunting events. Her family often saw mysterious lights hovering over oil wells, and even stranger were the sightings of small children dressed in white lingering nearby. These figures would appear both day and night, vanishing whenever the family approached.
She said they would be sitting on the side porch at night, and they would see lights over the oil wells, and a lot of times they would see what they thought were little children dressed in white.
One day, they succeeded in making contact. The beings spoke cryptically about creating a hybrid race, leaving Mabel puzzled and curious about their true intentions.
The main concept was creating a hybrid breed. At least that's what they told me. They were trying to create a race of people that could live in our atmosphere and in their atmosphere.
Little did she know, she was a part of it. She was soon taken and lived to birth a human-alien hybrid. Jean Robinson.
I knew this area behind my grandmother's house really well, and I took a different path that day. As I was coming up the hill, this small being just stepped out from behind a tree.
12-year-old Jean Robinson was taking a walk in the woods near her grandmother's house at 9:30 in the morning when she decided to stray off the beaten path and take a detour. As she approached the hill, a bean-shaped creature stepped out from behind a tree. The creature led her to a clearing where a sleek, triangular object stood.
I walked out of the trees. There was this huge craft, a triangular craft just above the tree line. It was beautiful. As scared as I was, put me in awe of it because it was shiny like stainless steel.
Next thing she knew, Jean was being lifted up. The creatures lay her on a table and inspected her before returning her. Years later, as an adult, she experienced it all over again. This time, she returned and claimed she had bore the aliens a human-alien hybrid baby, who she was forced to leave behind as part of an alien experiment.
They checked me out and they put something in me, and it was really traumatic at the time. I feel like it sort of took some of my innocence away at the time.
Jose Antonio da Silva. On the 4th of May, 1969, just as afternoon approached, 24-year-old Jose's fishing trip was interrupted when the freshly enlisted soldier heard voices behind him, felt light strike his legs, and his knees buckled. 2 4-foot-tall creatures wearing shiny, aluminum-like suits grabbed his arms and dragged him to a tall cylinder. The craft rose, with a blindfolded and terrified Jose listening to the 2 beings communicate in an unknown language. They landed somewhere, and Jose opened his eyes to see a giant, hairy creature with waist-long red hair. They interrogated him about the military, inspected his fishing tools, and even showed him 4 other men laying lifeless. Jose refused to cooperate and was struck unconscious before waking up in Victoria, 200 miles away from where he'd been fishing previously. Betina Rodriguez Aguilera. Floridians know Aguilera for her time as a vice mayor and congressional candidate, but she made headlines when she revealed her encounter with aliens.
In a 2009 interview on America TV, Betina Rodriguez Aguilera described meeting aliens aboard a spaceship, a childhood experience she's not interested in talking about.
It all began when Aguilera was 7 and met 3 humanoid beings, 2 female and 1 male, all tall, full-colored and blonde, dressed in majestic robes. They took her aboard a spaceship, where they were able to communicate telepathically. They questioned her about the Egyptian goddess Isis, but Aguilera had no idea about her back then. She was returned home and forgot everything. But her memories returned when she encountered similar beings as a teen, but this time they reminded her of Jesus, leaving her with yet another big mystery and an unforgettable fear of the unknown.
That I'm just going to keep on focusing on the community, what I've done and what I'm doing. And everyone that knows me knows that is what I am, and that's what I will continue to be doing.
George Clinton and Bootsy.
I was riding in Toronto, and we saw a laser. Midday, right in the middle of the day. Nice, right? Laser in daylight, that's a weird look. That's right.
The legendary musicians George Clinton and Bootsy Collins recently came forward with their story of an alien abduction. The duo were traveling in Toronto when they noticed a laser, one that was so bright it clearly outshone the sun. Confused, the duo continued driving, but suddenly some silver object dove down, tumbling through trees ahead and landing on the ground. At the same time, their car's light began flickering, as if disturbed by an unseen energy. Everything was so bright the duo could barely move. After 5 minutes, they woke up from their trance-like state, and there wasn't anything there. So they rushed home, only to realize night had fallen, and they had no way to explain those lost hours.
When it hit the ground, it looked like electricity splattering is popping. The next one landed in the same block now, on the other side of the street. I reached for the radio, to turn down and look, and then the third one hit the car.
Elizabeth Clery. Elizabeth Clery first saw a UFO in 1954 in Drakensberg Mountain, but the next time she encountered it, in 1956, a handsome humanoid stepped out and took her aboard. As the duo traveled across multiple starry worlds, he introduced himself as Akon, an astrophysicist from Meton, a planet in Proxima Centauri, just 4.2 light-years away. Clery fell in love with Akon and even bore him a son, but was forced to return to Earth without the babe, as she couldn't bear Meton's atmosphere. That's not what's weird, though. Clery claimed Proxima had artificial lights, but was laughed out. But just in 2021, NASA discovered that indeed is possible. Is it possible Clery was telling the truth all this time? Terrell Copeland. Terrell Copeland, a former U.S. Marine, experienced multiple encounters with UFOs. Initially, it was just a couple of sightings here and there, but one day, someone knocked on his door. It was a military contractor who told Copeland that the U.S. government was in contact with extraterrestrials and had noticed Copeland had frequent sightings. Since that day, Copeland began blacking out, waking up with no memories of the hours he'd lost. And then he was abducted by a humanoid woman with black eyes and an elongated skull. From there on, he recalls nothing except being back home safe, waving to a flying spaceship. Unlike other abductees, Copeland was sure he was only being surveilled and that he was safe. David Rudman. In 2016, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel David Rudman shared a chilling story from 1987. While hunting in California with his father and friends, David witnessed a bright light and heard strange sounds near their tent. He woke up to find himself paralyzed, watching vibrant lights and hearing footsteps. Breaking free, he saw tall, gray aliens and fled. but his father and friend were pulled into a UFO. He tried following, but was rendered motionless and eventually fainted. He was awoken by a loud bang and saw his friend and father right by him, both waking up in a similar manner. Assuming he'd just seen a bad dream, he recounted it to them, only to find out that's exactly what they experienced. Leah Haley.
I had an encounter one night. I was abducted by the chalky-colored creatures, and their normal medical experiments were performed on me.
Leah Haley, a married homemaker with teenage daughters, had a disturbing revelation while visiting her mother in Alabama. She and her brother remembered seeing alien crafts hovering outside their home when they were young. This memory unlocked something darker. In the late 1970s, Leah recalled being abducted. She found herself on a spacecraft in a round, light-filled room, lying flat out on an examination table. Surrounding her were off-white aliens with big, black, almond-shaped eyes. No hair, no ears, and just holes for noses. She doesn't remember much, except being returned home safe.
Medical experiments were performed on me, but they didn't bring me all the way home that night. Instead, what they did was drop me off in a field near my home.
Once she shared this experience, Leah's story distanced her from her family. She was recommended to psychiatrists, but was declared as telling the truth. What do you think?
I was begging for God to help me understand what was going on. You know, why were these aliens interested in me? Why were the military and government officials interested in me? And what was happening? What did the phenomenon mean? And I was begging for answers.
Irma Rick. On November 16th, Irma Rick disappeared and was then found 65 kilometers from home the next day. She claimed she had been transported by a white light, which shone so brightly it had made her blind. And then, nothing. For a while, Irma kept quiet, sharing her story only with Jacinto, her husband. But she broke her silence in 2022 when she appeared on a news channel and claimed she was carrying a human-alien hybrid baby. Irma begged the audience to help her collect the funds to support her medical appointments, but she later went off the grid. That's the scary part. Since then, nobody's heard from Irma or her husband, and many believe they were forcefully taken to an extraterrestrial planet. Linda Porter.
I received a letter carefully written from Linda Porter. This led up to her sending me a whole lot of drawings.
In 1963, in the quiet town of Covina, 17-year-old Linda Porter's life changed forever when she woke up on an unfamiliar spaceship, surrounded by blinding lights and eerie sounds. A small gray creature guided her to a room where she encountered a nearly 7-foot-tall entity resembling a praying mantis. Linda's story stands out as it occurred before alien abduction tales became popular, adding credibility to her account.
The fact that this occurred in 1963 is very intriguing because it's before the abduction phenomenon became popularized.
Unlike common reports of gray aliens, she described a hierarchy, with the praying mantis figure possibly in a leadership role. Throughout her teens and 20s, Linda claimed multiple encounters with these beings. She later shared her experiences, revealing the aliens' interest in the human soul and witnessing humans in suspended animation, raising some chilling questions.
One of the drawings was of a praying mantis about 8 feet tall in a room that was very odd, had a cylindrical object and sparkles of light.
Hans Buckman. In 1572, Hans Buckman, a struggling peasant, prepared to walk 4 miles from Kreispool to Sempak to settle a hefty debt. And he left without informing his family. 2 weeks later, Hans awoke dirty and disheveled in a strange city alley. His clothes were ragged and his belongings were missing. Confused, he approached a soldier who revealed they were in Milan, over 150 miles from his home. What should have been a 2-hour journey turned into a 2-week mystery, leaving Hans with no memory of how he crossed the Alps to Italy. For years, he would recall bits and pieces, claiming to have met extraterrestrials, but never uttering a word more. For centuries, Hans's tale met criticism, but was never debunked. Robert Taylor.
There's a huge
thing with a big round dome, a very dark grey colour, and it had a big flange going all the way around.
On November 9th, 1979, Bob Taylor encountered a massive, dark gray craft with strange balls on spikes that approached him. He felt a strong tug and smelled a choking odor before losing consciousness.
It came right up beside me, and I remember feeling a tug at that time. A very powerful smell, a choking sort of smell. That was it.
Later, he crawled home, unable to walk properly from severe dehydration and terror. Taylor's clothes were dirty, his trousers torn, and he was visibly shaken. Investigations found odd track marks and holes at the site. Taylor's torn trousers and long johns had upward tears. Skeptics suggested he might have had an epileptic fit or a lucid dream. However, Taylor had no history of fits and maintained that he had been taken by aliens from Venus. To this day, even he doesn't know what really happened to him.
He looked quite shocked, and he was drained, he was right white, and his face was dirty, and he had a red scar here, and his clothes were all dirty, and his trousers, and then he told me his trousers had been torn.
David Lieb Hart.
That girl up here looks like Sonia Root, my ex-girlfriend. In fact, I have a crush on a Palladian woman. Her name is Batar.
Who?
A Palladian woman is an extraterrestrial that comes from star Orion.
David was staying at his parents' house on Westwood Drive when he noticed a strange glow above. Within moments, strange figures appeared by his bedside, having climbed in from the open windows.
So I had the glass window doors open, and these weird-looking beings came in my room. I tried to cover my head. They pulled the sheet out for me, carried me, like 8 of them, carried me out to the outdoors.
These beings pulled the sheets off him and carried him into the night toward a bright light that seemed to cut through the sky. Inside the spaceship, they gently took samples and left a mark, an irremovable ring on his skin.
They took samples of my hair, of a ring that they cut around there that hasn't left. And they cut marks. They cut a ring here. They cut marks that never left.
He fell asleep and woke up back in bed with some memories of his strange encounter. Creepily, since then, he's received multiple strange visitors, all popping in to warn him for the future. But David no longer fears them. To him, they're a part of his identity.
I did not tell people that I believed in UFOs, and I had this experience until I started seeing TV shows about UFOs. And then I met a woman named Linda Moulton Howe, who was my favorite UFO, and Wendell Stevens. And it says, you don't have to be afraid to let people know that you had this experience. There's other people that have had abduction experiences.
Cow abduction. For years, we've seen cartoons jokingly show aliens taking our cows. But what if this idea appeared out of reality? In one of the most unbelievable moments, as an anonymous farmer was giving an interview, cameras captured a cow in the back being airlifted. You'd hope there was some helicopter or something pulling a wire in the air, but there's nothing, save for a very faint glow. After realizing, the man and the camera crew began panicking, but were naturally hopeless. What if aliens have been doing this to us for centuries, but we've only managed to get proof now? Peter Cory. In July 1988, Peter Cory was asleep when his body suddenly froze. He could only move his eyes and saw tall, thin creatures with golden yellow skin and black slits for eyes. One of them approached, holding a needle, and then Peter fainted. Although only 10 minutes passed, he found over 2 hours had vanished. He told his wife, who believed him, but the incident was never discussed again. In July of 1992, Peter fell asleep and was awakened by an odd sensation. He saw 2 humanoid blonde women with milky white skin, large bulging eyes, and pointed chins. He blacked out, but awoke to a single blonde hair laid beside him. He kept the hair, but remained silent about the strange event. Pasag Gula abduction. On the night of October 11th, 1973, while fishing on the Pascagoula River in Mississippi, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker heard a strange noise. An oval-shaped craft appeared out of nowhere, and 3 bizarre humanoid figures emerged.
Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker told of a strange craft landing near their fishing site and of being taken aboard by 3 unearthly creatures.
These creatures had wrinkled skin, moved like robots, and had claw-like hands. The beings took Hickson and Parker aboard their craft, where an examination took place. The men felt their bodies being inspected, but the beings didn't touch them. Traumatized, they sought help from the local sheriff's department, only to be met with disbelief. The officers locked them in an interrogation room, expecting a confession. To their shock, the 2 men spoke in terrified whispers about their ordeal.
Over toward the river, fishing in the river, and the fish still wasn't biting, so I told Calvin, I said, well, we might as well go home.
Proving they weren't lying. Zach Agee. Zach Agee was just 6 years old when aliens first abducted him. He floated out of his house and into a UFO with a bright white interior, where he was placed on a table. He saw small beings but couldn't make out their features clearly. Then he noticed their leader, a towering alien resembling a praying mantis with bulging, beady eyes. The creature held Zach's head, making everything go fuzzy. Suddenly, Zach found himself back in his bed. To this day, Zach fears their terrifying return. Betty and Drayson Luca. On the evening of January 25th, 1967, in South Ashburnham, Massachusetts, Betty claimed that alien beings visited her home. She recounted being taken aboard their spacecraft, where they conducted various procedures on her. Betty described the aliens as angelic beings who communicated messages of love and unity. Under hypnosis, she detailed her interactions with these beings, stating that they never harmed her but performed several tests. UFO researcher Raymond D. Fowler documented her case extensively, publishing multiple books on her experiences. Initially, no one but Fowler believed her. However, Betty claimed her family was under government surveillance for years, sparking rumors that the government was involved in her case and possibly conspiring with the aliens. Antonio Villas Boas. Antonio Villas Boas, a 23-year-old farmer from Brazil, was working late at night to escape the day's heat when he noticed a red star in the sky. The light moved towards him, revealing itself as an aerial craft with a spinning top. As he tried to escape, small humanoid creatures captured him and took him aboard the ship. Inside, they covered him with a clear, odorless liquid. Boas also encountered an attractive female alien with blonde hair and a pointed chin. He believed they conducted a breeding experiment. After returning home, Boas experienced nausea, weakness, anxiety, and vivid nightmares of the encounter. He is convinced that a hybrid race of human aliens is preparing to take over the world. I guess we'll see. Terry Lovelace.
And it was enormous. I did a drawing of it, contemporaneous with the event.
Could you draw it now?
Sure, I could draw it now. That will give you an idea.
Wow, it's huge.
Compared to you, looks massive.
In June 1977, U.S. Air Force medic Terry Lovelace and his friend Toby went camping in Devil's Den State Park, Arkansas. As night descended, a massive triangular craft with bright lights appeared overhead, enveloping them in an intense glow.
We saw 3 lights, with the center light being the apex of the triangle pointed in our direction.
The 2 men blacked out and awoke with no memory of what had occurred. They found themselves physically unwell, experiencing severe dehydration and mysterious body marks. Fearful for their careers, they kept silent about the incident.
I had what the doctors called flash burn. Very painful.
Like a radiation burn.
Yeah, and that scared me.
Decades later, an X-ray revealed an inexplicable implant in Lovelace's leg. This discovery led him to share his story publicly in his book, Incident at Devil's Den, where he claims the government is aware of alien presence on Earth and will soon reveal the truth.
Badge on from the Office of Special Investigations, and he bent over my bed and got down next to my ear, and he said, "Son, I know you 2 knuckleheads stumbled onto something while you were out there." And I think you know what I'm talking about.
Betty Hill and Barney Hill.
So we're traveling along when suddenly a very strange looking maneuvering craft started following us for several miles. In an area called Indian Head, this craft left the highway, came out over the highway, and stopped in midair.
On the night of September 19th, 1961, Betty and Barney Hill experienced one of the most famous alien abduction cases in history. While driving through New Hampshire's White Mountains, they spotted a UFO. The encounter involved an abduction, during which both were subjected to medical examinations by unknown beings. Immediately after, the Hills noticed odd things. Neither of their watches worked, and there were shiny circles on their car's trunk that caused a compass to spin wildly.
Now later, in our investigation of this, we began to realize that we could not remember what had happened between the two series of beeping sounds.
Distressed, they sought help from Dr. Benjamin Simon, who placed them under hypnosis. They recalled detailed interactions with the aliens, including a star map that Betty later reproduced, which allegedly showed the aliens' home near the Zeta Reticuli star system.
The beings whom he had seen on board the craft were now standing in the middle of this road, and the car motor stalled. Barney was trying to start the car. It wouldn't start. They separated, came up, and took us out of the car in two groups.
Herbert Shermer.
Good evening, I'm Jennifer Griswold. At the time, you could say it caught the town of Ashland by surprise. A local cop said he saw and went inside a UFO. The man behind that sighting has since died, but new attention is brewing over his tale.
One night, 22-year-old police officer Herbert Shermer was on patrol when he noticed what seemed like red truck lights on the road. As he got closer, he realized they belonged to a metallic disc-shaped object hovering above. The object emitted a high-pitched whine and a blue flame before whisking Shermer away. When he returned, he experienced a severe headache and had a red welt on his neck. Under hypnosis by Dr. Sprinkle in 1968, Shermer recalled short, humanoid beings with cat-like eyes and uniforms adorned with a winged serpent emblem. He learned they used electrical power and had bases on Venus and Earth. Although the Condon Committee, which studied UFOs, was doubtful, Shermer stands by his account.
It got national attention to begin with. It was printed in newspapers, the National Enquirer, throughout the United States.
Carl Higden. On October 25, 1974, Carl Higden set out for a hunting trip in Medicine Bow National Forest. As he aimed at an elk, his slug did something odd. It slowed down mid-air and fell to the ground. That's when he met Auso, a humanoid being with an unusual appearance, dressed in a tight black jumpsuit. Auso handed Carl pills that promised to replace the need for food, which he accepted. Suddenly, Carl found himself aboard a transparent vehicle, whisked away to a dimension filled with strange landscapes and figures. He was returned to Earth just as abruptly, left with only the reversed bullet as evidence. Strangely, after this encounter, his health improved, and he never fell ill again. Travis Walton. On November 5, 1975, Travis Walton vanished while working in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. His logging crew reported seeing a bright light and a disc-shaped object. Walton seemed entranced and disappeared into the light. Polygraph tests backed their story. A massive search ensued, and Walton reappeared days later near Heber, Arizona, with fragmented memories. Over time, he recounted being on an alien spacecraft, subjected to examinations by strange beings. He claimed these beings could disguise themselves as humans. Eventually, Walton managed to escape. Despite inconsistencies in his timeline, Walton's story of alien abduction remained consistent and passed several lie detector tests. Karim Bianchi. Senator Karim Bianchi from Chile's Antarctic region never expected his life to delve into the strange. One night in 2012, while driving from Natales to Punta Arenas, a massive, rotating saucer appeared, causing his car to abruptly stall, shutting down everything, including his phone. Moments later, he inexplicably found himself 200 kilometers away, with no memory of the journey. Following this incident, Bianchi noticed bizarre occurrences, like frequent owl sightings. Once, a strange stranger even handed him an owl. The strangeness peaked when an elderly bald man visited his office claiming to be from another planet and handed over secret NASA documents about Bianchi's abduction. Now that's bizarre. The repeated owl sightings just don't add up. Linda Cortile Napolitano. Linda awoke to an eerie sensation as a UFO hovered outside her 12th floor window, pulling her upwards. Witnesses, including 2 bodyguards of the UN Secretary General, claimed to have seen the event unfold. Inside the UFO, Linda faced gray aliens in a room brimming with futuristic technology. She underwent a strange examination, details of which emerged later through hypnosis. Although she returned physically unharmed, Linda was profoundly changed. Her once cheerful demeanor was gone, and November 30th, 1989 haunted her as the darkest day of her life. Despite the bodyguard's support, Linda's account faced skepticism. Some believed her abduction was a bizarre cover-up for a hidden UN plot, but the truth remains elusive. Actual alien abduction. We've all heard about alien abductions, but imagine witnessing one. 2 friends were strolling through a forest clearing when suddenly one of them vanished into thin air. His friend stood frozen in shock, bewildered and unable to comprehend what had just happened. As soon as he grasped the situation, he fled, leaving the area in a hurry. A few hours later, the missing friend reappeared on the ground, disheveled and visibly panicked. He struggled to stand and eventually left the scene. If we slow down the footage, a pillar of light is visible, indicating that he had indeed been lifted into the air. It's a chilling glimpse into the unknown.